Today in episode 54 of the podcast, we will be reviewing Den of Thieves 2, Pantera, and Season 1 of Creature Commandos. We'll also be giving the rundown on the top stories of the week, including a cryptic post by Will Smith that kind of hints that he might be heading into the Matrix. And I'm Brad, he's Josh, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
Before we jump into the news this week, please don't forget to give us a like and subscription on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you're getting our episodes when they drop every single Monday morning. As always, if you're listening in the audio realm, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. Also, go to willbringthepopcorn.com where you can get all of our archive footage, all of our past episodes. It also has our merch store in it, so you can continue to support the podcast in that way. Can't thank you enough for your continued support. And also, we want to take a moment this morning to just send some love and, thoughts out to the people that are being affected by the wildfires out in Los Angeles and the greater Los Angeles area. So much devastation and destruction that they're dealing with these wildfires. It's really affecting so many lives and communities. If you go to our YouTube video for this podcast, we will be having some links to some things that can help out if you wish to donate or help out to all the people that are affected by these things. Just a really tragic event. Our thoughts are with everyone in that area, and hopefully, things get better in the days going forward.
Yeah, we just hope everyone is able to be safe and got out and was able to get away from the fires before it hit their homes or something else, or that it's staying away from your homes, because that's just devastating what's happening out there. And, there's no real easy way to transition out of that, but we wanted to head into our first news story of the day, which is about Will Smith put up a cryptic post on his social medias that, it was the Matrix computer screen, and it says, it talks about how Will turned down the role of Neo, which famously he turned down Neo to do his blockbuster Wild Wild West, which, that worked out perfectly for him. But yeah, he turned down Neo, but that post showed that, okay, what happened if Will never turned down Neo? And then it said, "Wake up, Will." So it's kind of curious to see, are they hinting there could be a reboot of The Matrix and they're going to have Will Smith in it? Are they going to do a special, little scene or something with him? It was kind of strange to see that, because, of course, Will Smith is much older now, as is Keanu, who famously played Neo. It's going to be curious to see if a project actually comes out of this, or if he's just kind of playing with something. Maybe there's an animated version. Maybe they're going to do another anthology or something of animated Matrix stuff, and Will's going to voice Neo or something. It's going to be really interesting to see if what comes out of this.
Yeah, it's one of those classic Hollywood what ifs. Like a guy turns down a role, it winds up going to another actor, and it becomes this incredibly iconic role. Like, I keep saying I want to do a case study of the what if, do a whole what if episode on what if this person got this role that was originally intended or written for it and got offered for it first and ultimately turned it down to either they weren't interested in the project or they had something else going on that they thought was going to be better. If it works out for them or if it doesn't, this is a classic case of it not necessarily working out for them the best. Wild Wild West did okay at the box office, but The Matrix obviously has gone on to become this global multi-billion-dollar movie franchise that obviously Wild Wild West never became. But it's interesting to see what would have happened had his career at that point, had he chosen to jump on and stay as Neo. Would the film be as popular as it is now if it weren't for Keanu Reeves being in it? I don't know. It's one of those fun what if scenarios to play. I don't know where this is all really leading with Will Smith. Will Smith is kind of, obviously, if you follow anything with the news with Will Smith, has kind of seen his career kind of almost, I don't want to say hit rock bottom necessarily, but he's lost a whole lot of the goodwill that he did have, where he was one of, at one point he was the can't miss bankable blockbuster summer movie star for years, and then now recently with all of his personal stuff and obviously the incident with the the slap at the Oscars and everything, he's really seen his career take a huge hit because of it. And I'm just wondering why he's teasing this all of a sudden, if he's got something in the works, or this is just one of those throw something out and see if people start talking to kind of manifest it,
Or just kind of get his name back out there because he's got a project coming out or something else. Because, Wild Wild West was one that kind of, he was the box office king. If you were looking at the summer blockbuster, it was Will Smith. And Wild Wild West was one that kind of plateaued him there. That, he was climbing and going, then he did that. And it was overall, it's thought of being one of the worst movies ever made. overall, and so that did hurt his career. So yeah, do you imagine what could have happened if he was Neo and he didn't plateau there with Wild Wild West and everything that's going on now that's caused him to go down? Because I think even I Am Legend 2 was in the works for a while, but it sounds like it's dead in the water. So yeah, it's curious to see if they end up doing something with him in the Matrix, because I couldn't see them doing a reboot to bring him back in. I know the last one, it made some money, but it wasn't very well received.
Sure. Yeah.
As the second and third one wasn't very received either. Like, the first Matrix is a fantastic film that caught everybody off guard. Second and third one, they were good, but they had their issues and stuff. The fourth one I was a little mixed on. I had fun with it, but it was something like, did we really need to revisit it after so long and do that? But if they revisit again with Will, it's going to be curious to see exactly how they do this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of reserving judgment on that. It's funny that he's using this and teasing it. Like, it's got to lead to something, right? What is it leading to? Why are you posting about it? What's going to? It's just something we have to keep an eye on. And, I don't know if this means, like you said, if they're doing something in the animated realm, if they're doing something. Watch it be something as silly as a commercial, and he's kind of making fun of it, like it's going to be a Super Bowl commercial or something. You know what I mean?
He's dodging Big Macs,
right? Something weird or whatever. But it's interesting to see if it leads anywhere, and it's definitely something we'll keep an eye on.
You don't even think about that with the Super Bowl coming up. It could be a Super Bowl commercial where he's playing Neo. Like, I didn't even think about that till now, because after our Bengals was eliminated, the NFL doesn't exist anymore. So I didn't even think about it. It could be something as simple as a Super Bowl commercial.
It could be. It's just something to keep an eye on. We'll see where that leads. But I want to pivot now over to some news coming out of Sony. Sony has, been a little up and down on what they're going to adapt as far as their video games. There's been talk of a Horizon series for a while that kind of got shut down, and they've been up and down on what they're going to do. Obviously, there's some issues with their whole handling of Spider-Man and that whole Versa films and everything, but it seems like they are starting to move forward a little bit with some video game adaptations into both film and TV. So they're talking about making a live-action Horizon Dawn movie, which is awesome. It's a fun game. Also, a very popular game that kind of took people by surprise with how well it was received and how well it was done was Helldivers. And they're talking about making a live-action film out of it. And they're also talking about taking the very popular Ghost of Tsushima video game and making it into an animated series, partnering with Crunchyroll to put that out. So some things in the works at Sony for sure.
Yeah, we'll see the Ghost of Tsushima in 2027. I'm really looking forward to that because I absolutely love the game, and it could fit very well with anime. You actually have, if you watch the Star Wars Visions, there was the Samurai episode. It's the director and people behind that episode that's doing it, so that's already got me. All right, that was a fantastic episode of that series, which I absolutely loved. Like, I wish they would do a live action Samurai Star Wars, because we all know that it was based off of the, with the Seven Samurai and the old samurai films and everything else. I would love to see them go deeper into that. And we have this group doing Ghost of Tsushima, so I'm really looking forward to that. And Helldivers could be really good. Helldivers 2 is doing big numbers, but it's also one that it's kind of a Starship Troopers-esque type of property, so that could do really well. Like, that's one of my guilty pleasures is Starship Troopers. I go back and rewatch it probably once a year. There's a lot of fun. So I'm curious to see exactly if they go a Starship Troopers route or if they try to make it more serious or exactly how they handle that as a film. But Horizon Zero Dawn could be a fantastic film. Like, yeah, the series kind of fell apart. So if they do it as maybe we'll get a film trilogy or something else out of it, but it could be a visually beautiful film. It could be done really well. And, I forget the actress's name, but I've kind of thrown her out there for the live action from Game of Thrones, Jon Snow's woman, the Wildling. She would be perfect.
Oh, fantastic.
To step in and do that.
Yeah, I even think they based that character on her, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. There was some influence on that for sure, but yeah, those are some fun properties that I'm excited to see them take on. I'm really excited for the Ghost of Tsushima one. That's one of my favorite games of all time. I know they have a follow-up. If you're into gaming, Ghost of Yotei is one of the most anticipated games of 2025, the follow-up to that.
Can't wait for that.
Excited for that. But yeah, getting it in... It's getting its own anime series, like partnering with Crunchyroll, coming out in 2027, like you mentioned. So it's got a little ways to go, but that has all the makings of something that's really cool. Because if you've never played that game, visually it's incredibly stunning. It's got a really powerful story. The battle between this Japanese samurai and these Mongolian overlords that are trying to, overtake the island and stuff like that. And it's a really fun game with a really beautifully told story and just visually incredible. So the opportunities for that anime to be really special, I'm very excited for, and hopefully, like you said, with the people that were involved with that incredible episode of Star Wars Visions, like bring this to light. I have very high hopes for the quality of this show, and it's something I'm very much looking forward to.
And as far as we know, there still is the live action Ghost of Tsushima is still in the works as well. So we've got several things coming out of that. We really don't have any more information on when filming is going to begin on the live action series for it. But give me more of that world because it was really fantastic. And I am looking forward to the sequel coming out this year. But we're going to stay in the Sony realm because there was some big news that broke from the Spider-Verse side. So Pelak Patel, who was the executive who was the in-between man between Marvel and Sony, and he was also heading up the Spider-Verse of the villain spinoff Spider-Verse. He has left the company. He is headed over to Prime Focus Studios to be the CCO, so they worked on the Garfield movie. They've got the Animal Friends movie that's coming out later this year. So he's moved over there, and he's no longer with Sony, so I have a feeling that wasn't exactly his choice, maybe, that he was kind of forced out after. I mean, the Venom films were received pretty well, but outside of the Venom films, all of the others were disasters and bombs and cost the company a lot of money. So I have a feeling like he was, well, it might be time for you to move on because that company is kind of linked to Sony as well still. So he's kind of still in Sony, but he's not going to have anything to do with Marvel and the Spider-Verse anymore.
It's like the classic guy who gets stationed out to a remote outpost in Alaska or something, you know what I mean? The guy that just kind of, you keep him around, but you keep him at an arm's distance away from anything. I think this just leads me to it's going to lead to amplified speculation of, there's been talks of Disney trying to buy the rights to Spider-Man back from Sony or even just purchasing Sony outright. I kind of think this is going to maybe help fan those flames of rumors of, that being a potential thing that's happening again. Obviously, they fumbled hard with, their take on these Spider-Man villain movies. They haven't been the greatest. They haven't been the best well-received. Their PR handling on it has been terrible. I mean, you've got the guy coming out and basically saying, we could have used Spider-Man this entire time, but we didn't. Why you wouldn't when he's a bankable billion-dollar box office attraction? You're just digging your heels in. You're like, we're not going to use him in these films. And it just makes absolutely no sense. And get this guy who's kind of that in-between between Sony and Marvel with this whole Spider-Man stuff to just move on to something else. Hopefully that clears out a lot of that mess and we can get back to good stories again if they decide to eventually restart it. I know they're planning on pausing it for a while, but if they do decide to start up again without selling it back to Marvel, what they could come up with, because you got one of the most bankable characters of all time at your arsenal. Why you just refuse to acknowledge or use him or tie him to your stories in any meaningful way just makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, and they tried to spin also here recently that Madam Web's failure was because of the media and not because it was a bad movie. And they didn't think that any of the movies it did were bad, which they weren't horrendous. I mean, Madam Web had a lot of problems.
It was bad.
It was really bad, but there wasn't a whole lot of care, it seemed, to these characters, also because they wanted every single one of them to be an anti-hero. So you had Venom as the anti-hero. Yeah. You had Kraven as the anti-hero. You had Morbius as the anti-hero. You didn't have any variety within it. You had all anti-heroes, which it would have been maybe better if you went straight for Kraven as the full villain. Just give us a full villain story where, the villain actually wins in the end and he's full on villain and bad guy in here. But yeah, and having 7 films and no Spider-Man, Spider-Man villains, no Spider-Man show up. And we also had a lot of fighting, it seemed, in between, because Spider-Man 4 is going to get rolling on filming this year, but apparently there's a lot of butting heads between Sony and Marvel, and with him being the in-between guy, it seems like, all right, maybe it was with him, and they couldn't figure out, because, Marvel apparently wants to do the next Spider-Man as a grounded, street-level hero, as we all love and adore, and Sony wanted to keep the multiverse going. There's rumors of everything that happened in the third Venom movie would carry over into the fourth Spider-Man movie, and a huge mess. So we don't know if him leaving, if anything is going to change in that, or if Sony's going to stick behind what they were wanting. But it does feel weird, or just feels like Disney is going to have to do something here to try to get Spider-Man back away from them, just because of how poorly those films have done with Marvel's name attached to it. it's going to be interesting to see if they give Sony another chance with someone else in there to do something decent. Because before he even announced that he was leaving, there was talks that they were going to do their own Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to use Tom Holland. They were going to have their own Spider-Man in their Spider-Verse, which could be okay, but you also already had Toby and you had Andrew, and you have them mixing in with the MCU, and then you're going to create another one while Tom Holland is still playing it. So it's like, we were all waiting to see Tom Holland show up. So if they do another one, we'll just see, are they going to reboot Spider-Man on their own while Marvel's still using it's a mess, and I'm really curious to see how it moves forward with a new person in there.
I could almost see Sony just kind of digging their heels in a sense like, hey, we're going to use Miles Morales instead. We've already got this, into the Spider-Verse, across the Spider-Verse stuff that's been wildly successful as well. Like, are we going to, like, instead of just using the Peter Parker Spider-Man, we're going to use a different Spider-Man. We're going to use Miles Morales instead.
We've had Marvel teasing that Miles is going to show up in the MCU after the Beyond the Spider-Verse film comes out, which is the Sony property that they've done right with Spider-Man.
Right, and I could see them like, okay, well, you can have Peter Parker, we'll take Miles, and kind of bank on that. Like, it's a whole messy situation in that I could see if that relationship really does go south, like with this whole new Spider-Man thing, if they decide to move on and move into the other. So there's other Spider-Man they can use. Obviously, it doesn't have to be Peter Parker. Like, there's different ones that they could pull from, but at the same time, like, that's your best bet. Like, what are we doing here? You had, Tom Holland, who is, to his credit, been in so many successful films at this point. Why you never integrated him into what you were doing just makes no sense at all to me whatsoever. But this is the path they decided to go, and they're kind of making their bed and lying in it with the way these films have been received, and for the most part, generally not very well received, and for good reason. The films have not been the greatest. So, like, I don't agree with the whole media making them out to be bad. No, these are objectively bad films. Well, I say objectively, but it's subjectively bad. But an overwhelming majority of people who've seen these movies also agree. So you can't necessarily blame it on how the media spins it. Like, we try to give these movies a fair shake, and obviously, our least favorite movie of last year was Madam Web. We still continue to poke fun about it, and the fact that we're still talking about it now is it's just asinine that you would say that it's a media, reasoning behind why these films were poorly received. No, it's because they were bad movies. Like, if they were good movies and you had people trying to dunk on it, that's we talk about that all the time. Or like, you see these, not to go off on a tangent, but you see where, like, people try to review bomb a movie and calling it terrible and bad, and then a bunch of people see the film and like, I don't know what these guys are talking about. It's a great movie. Like, we have that discourse all the time, so it's a poor excuse in my opinion.
Yeah, it just kind of doesn't make sense because they even again hyped up Craven. Like, all right, this is going to be the one that's going to make up for everything else that fans haven't liked about it, and we don't know why it didn't do well. I mean, Craven was probably the better out of all the ones that they've done recently. Like, the Venom films were fun, but I had my problems with The Last Dance because of, they brought in some more MCU actors and Sony actors that have been in the Spider-Man universe and had them play completely different roles. And it's like, it just felt like they just really didn't know what they were wanting to do or trying to do with anything. And it's burned into my mind when the Rhino screeches after he's told that they didn't get Craven. Like, I don't see how that was a good choice from the actor, from the studio, from anything. Like, it was so awkward. Like, I can still remember the whole theater was like, it was like silence in a bad way. Like, what in the world just happened? Why did he screech like a banshee because he didn't get the guy he was wanting? It was like, what was that?
You could hear people shuffling in their seats.
Do we leave? Do we stay? Do we leave? Do we stay?
it was a weird, awkward situation. But yeah, like, they're making their bed, they're gonna lie in it, and we'll see how that all shakes out. I kind of want to turn the conversation now towards Star Wars. So we do have a little bit of casting news coming out about Star Wars. So obviously the role of Baylen Skoll, if you've watched the show Ahsoka, Ray Stevenson had an incredible performance in that show for the one season, but unfortunately did pass before the show aired and made air on Disney. And we didn't really get a conclusion for that character. Well, now Disney's made the decision to recast the role, and they're using Rory McCann, who, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, played the Hound, who's an incredible performance in that role on that show. One of my personal favorite characters from that show. He is being cast in the role of Baylen Skoll, and he will be appearing in Ahsoka Season 2 once that starts to film and get underway. I'm excited for that. He's an incredible actor, great actor. I'm interested to see how he takes that role and kind of hopefully continues the honor, the incredible performance that Ray Stevenson gave to that role before his untimely passing. But it's interesting to see they make that choice to recast that role, which means they weren't done using that character yet and plan on using him more in season 2, like, to continue the story, and I'm excited to see what they do with it.
Yeah, we both talked about when the Ahsoka season 1 ended, like, exactly what are they going to do with this character, because they had the tragic loss of Rey, not only with his life, but he didn't get to see the love and the accolades that people gave for this performance, because he was fantastic. He really played it extremely well. It was a great character that we got, and it did leave his character like going off on a journey. He's got his kind of own storyline that was branching out from Ahsoka, and I'm happy to see that they're continuing it. And yeah, Rory is, I think, I didn't even think of him being a choice to replace him, but it makes sense. Like, he is a great actor, and he has that same kind of gravitas that Ray Stevenson did, so he can really give that character, I think, something. And yeah, I would love that if he can make it his own while also making sure it pays respect to what Ray did, because it was a fantastic performance by him that I'm just sad he didn't get to see how everyone felt about it and just didn't get to play it anymore, but also just because, tragically losing his life and everything. But I'm looking forward to Ahsoka Season 2. I think it's supposed to start filming sometime this year. We might, I think, get that in 2026. So I'm looking forward to see how that goes, because we got the Mandalorian and Grogu. We don't know if the worlds are going to mix in that movie, or if they're waiting until their big overall movie that they're going to bring it back. But I think that's a fantastic choice to replace a character with Rory, that he's going to do a fantastic job of continuing Baylen on and giving us some great acting and some great forward progress for that character.
Yeah, he was so good as the Hound in Game of Thrones. Like, one of my absolute favorite characters in that entire run was the Hound, and just the journey that he went on with his adventures with Arya Stark and the things that they did and everything that he got to go through. It was just such a well-written character, well-performed by Rory, and excited to see him take on this role and see what they do with Baylen in Season 2, because he kind of did set off on his own journey, and you're like, okay, well, you could kind of leave that as a mystery and like never really pay that off, but apparently they've got big enough plans that they felt it was important enough to recast. So I'm excited to see the journey that Baylen goes on in Season 2, what he sets off to do, and how he probably makes his way back and ties into everything that's going on. So obviously it's a big part of the story that they're trying to tell. So I'm excited to see that. I know they'll take good care of honoring Ray's work from Season 1. But yeah, Season 2 is going to be very, very highly anticipated on the show. Season 1 was very well received as well, and I know everybody's chomping at the bit to finally get Mandalorian and Grogu out in the theater, and to see that and see this next continuation of The Mandalorian, which is just, at the end of the day, one of these shows that blew up even bigger than people thought it would when they talked about making it a TV property. And it's just such a highly loved show, and just so many incredible performances on that it's branched off into a movie now. We got Ahsoka finally getting some TV love as well. So I'm excited to see all these things tie together and how they kind of wrap everything up when it's getting to the end of the line for this story and all these things that are coming together. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see when they get to it.
I'm waiting for all the photoshops of the Hound with the lightsaber. Just waiting to see all that.
I guarantee
you got
there's
him all the
like
makeup and just having him hold the lightsaber instead of a sword.
I bet if I pulled up Google right now, I would see something of that sort, and it's going to be awesome.
Well, continuing on with Disney, so we talked about it last year that Disney was teaming with Warner Brothers and Fox on a new venture, Venu Sports, that was going to combine ESPN, TNT, Fox Sports, all together in one app, one network that you could watch all these together. Well, it's dead in the water now. They've decided to cancel it, and it's not going to happen anymore, which that was going to be really curious to see how, because last year there was a lot of different talks of different studios bundling together and coming together so you could get this service, that service, and this service all from different companies, and we still have a few bundles like that out there. But it was interesting that they were going to try this with sports.
Yeah, I mean Disney. If you have Disney Plus, they've already started integrating like ESPN stuff onto their platform. There's certain things you can watch already. There's some live stuff that you can watch as well. Especially if you have ESPN Plus, you can watch it on Disney Plus as well when you're with your accounts linked. I know they've already got Hulu integrated into there as well. Like Max is kind of doing their own thing going in with live stuff. One thing we didn't talk about is they are live simulcasting All Elite Wrestling that they have on TNT onto Max that you can watch simultaneously. So they're kind of also doing their own thing. I know we've kind of hyper focused here with like Netflix and WWE and Monday Night Raw being live on there, which had an incredible kickoff as well for live viewership for them. It did gangbusters too, which is awesome to see. But yeah, like these other places are doing their own thing too, because you can watch the live stuff on Max as well. Like it seems like they're just pulling it all in house and kind of figuring out how to make it to work on platforms that already exist, which I kind of get from I get these companies wanting to come together for another thing that they could potentially make revenue from, but it's just at one point is too much. You know what I mean? Or too many options a bad thing. Like it definitely muddied the waters, and I'm surprised that they went as far as they did and ultimately killed it, though. I wonder what the reasoning behind it was that they decided not to move forward with it. Was it just they couldn't work out, either revenue splits for all the services or, what have you? I don't know what ultimately made the call for them to kill it, but it's interesting that it never saw the light of day because they were pushing hard for it, from what I remember.
The logistics seem kind of, because what if ESPN is getting 10 times the amount of viewership that Fox Sports or TNT is getting? What is their share? So, like, even though Disney is outperforming, they have to share equally. Maybe Disney didn't want to share. We don't really know. Yeah. They didn't really give a reason. I know there was also talk from Disney that Hulu and I think it's Fubo TV are going to be combining their live services together. So Disney is looking to kind of, maybe that is the endpoint, that we may end up in the end only having Disney Plus, and like there's no ESPN app, there's no Hulu app, there's no anything else. I have a feeling, especially with how streaming is doing and how much money they're losing, all these separate apps that they've had with all the different subscription services are going to bring them in to one single app that maybe will help them with cost a little bit, and which will probably mean they'll jack up the price a bit more with everything. But I have a feeling like they're too spread out, and they're working to get themselves to a point where everything is contained in one app. So and maybe we'll get a rebrand and rename where it's not Disney Plus or something else, but it's kind of hard to go away from the name Disney when you have all that, because Hulu and ESPN, and you have all the other big names too. But I have a feeling in the end we're going to get all these services taking everything back into one.
I've got the name for it already. It's Disney Plus.
Disney Plus.
That's what it's gonna be. Just taking everything and putting it under. We're just gonna add a little plus to it. And there you go. There you have it. There's your new service.
Disney Plus squared.
There's something ridiculous like that. But no, I get it. Like pulling everything in house makes sense. It's just maybe they work on a tier structure on like reconfiguring how, like what services you pay for, what tier you get, what you get with that tier kind of thing. I could see something like that happening.
Bundle your bundle with another bundle so you can get another bundle to bundle all your bundles.
All the bundles. You need them all. There's so many bundles. But I get it. That's something they could do that makes sense, I think. And we'll see what that looks like moving forward. The Hulu and Fubo, okay, that's fine. It might do okay, but I have a hard time seeing them try to put so much focus on things without trying to grow Disney Plus and making it bigger, because you see the things are already integrating, and it does feel like that's going to become like a one-stop shop. Like eventually it's going to be all in the live TV and everything like that. It's going to be like its own thing, and it's going to wind up costing as much as cable does again, and we're all going to be right back where we started, because that's how these things work.
Yeah, and we'll see if there's forced bundles too, that if you want ESPN Plus, you've got to do Hulu Live TV and stuff with that too. So they'll probably at one point come to a point like, all right, well, now it's going to cost me $100 just to get ESPN Plus. I'm like, all right, now I don't care about ESPN Plus anymore.
Force bundles. I see what you did there. Well played.
Force bundles.
Well played. You really force pushed that on us. You know what I'm saying? But I want to get to our last news story of the day. One of our most anticipated films of 2025 is 28 Years Later. The trailer for it looks absolutely phenomenal. One of the things people have been trying to comb through the trailer and almost like pause and start to see if they get any glimpse of Cillian Murphy, because we've heard so much about his involvement in these potential movies. Well, we got some news this week that I kind of really wasn't expecting, and they said that Cillian Murphy's actually not going to be in this film at all, which is, I don't know if I necessarily believe that, because I think they're just like, maybe stop looking for him. But they were trying to come out and say that he's not going to be in the film, but he's going to be involved in maybe one of the next productions in the series that they're talking about doing, because there is talk of potentially 3 more films, including this one coming. And we're just like, yeah, he's not going to be involved with this one. Don't know if I believe that. I believe that necessarily.
Yeah, it seems like, all right, don't look here, look over here. He's not here because, in the trailer that came out, there was a zombie that looked like Cillian. Sure. We're like, wait, did they kill him off and they're bringing him back as that? And then you had the actor come out saying, oh, no, it was me who was this. And they're like, we were surprised that people thought that was Cillian and like this. So it does seem like a distraction of like, all right, don't be looking too much into it. Maybe because he's executive producing these, but they kind of already announced that he was starting, and now maybe his stuff got cut, or they just decided not to do it, or as I'm feeling the same as you, it's a distraction. Like, oh, he's not in this, so when you go see the movie, it's like, oh, there he is.
Liars. Dirty, dirty liars. You told us he wasn't going to be here, and now he's here. I don't know. Like, I'm looking forward to the movie anyway. Like, it doesn't make any difference to me whether he's in it one way or another, but it does kind of feel like a whole, like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain situation. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not really here, but he's going to be here. Like, it's one of those where things like, why would you have him attached to this like that if you were just going to come? You would have said from the beginning, like, he was only going to be executive producing this. He's not going to make an appearance. It just feels a little off to me, and it was a weird story to come out where they're just like, nah, move along, nothing to see here, no Cillian Murphy, like, just enjoy this movie anyway, which I'm going to, but like, don't tell me not to expect him when you hyped his involvement to begin with. Now you're telling me he's not, and it could be like a whole, he did film a couple things and it got cut because it didn't fit the whole story or whatever. Okay, but until I see the movie, I'm not buying it. I'm still going in with some expectation to potentially see him in something. It's not going to hinder my enjoyment of the movie if he doesn't make an appearance in it, but I just thought it was like a weird little nugget of information for them to put out there. Like, nah, he's not in it. Like,
yeah, because he went on to talk more about it, that Aaron Taylor Johnson, it's his son. Those two together in the movie are kind of going off on an adventure to see how things are in the world. So it's a new group and may not be happening in the exact same area that, Cillian Murphy's. But they did say that most of this does seem to be within this universe is mainly in Europe, that you're not seeing it in the United States or anything else like this is mainly happening in Europe. So they gave a few more potential details, but yeah, I do believe that it's this is not the Cillian you're looking for. Like, don't look over here. Or is it? Oh, there he is. Like, if he doesn't show up, I mean, it's not going to be a disappointment. I'm looking forward to it as well. Like, whether he's involved or not, but I love him as an actor, and he was fantastic in the original. So I really want to see, kind of where his characters. But I also am glad if they decided that they couldn't find something that really worked well for the character to bring him back, that they're not doing it. Like, they're not forcing him in there just to force him in there. So if he's not in it, I hope that's the case, is that they just decided, you know what, we just don't see the right logistic way to bring him into this world. Maybe where we go in the second or third one, that we find that place that we could put him, but we're not going to force him in there.
He's had 28 years to figure out where he can get from where they were to where they are. And if Daryl Dixon can go from Georgia or wherever they were for The Walking Dead to France for his own thing, they can find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It was a fun little story to talk about, where they're just like, it's so rare to see studios come out or somebody associated with the movie to come out and be like, hey, he's not really that involved. So it kind of just makes you like perk up a little bit, raise an eyebrow to it, and just like, what are you getting at here? What are you trying to pull a fast one on us? We'll see. Like I said, I'm not going into that movie with that being my sole expectation from it. So if he's not in it, at the end of the day, it's not that big a deal to me. I'm still hyped as hell to see that movie. It's going to be a ton of fun, and I'm excited to get our eyes on it and review it for the show for sure.
We'll still have the zombie-looking Cillian to see in the
movie. Absolutely. And I guarantee they'll come out afterwards. Well, it was all we could use him for, like, for a day in that makeup. I'm like, okay.
Watch the people stop seeing that as Cillian, that they put like a CGI beard or something on the zombie. So like, see, it's not Cillian. It's got a beard.
He's got a mustache. He's got to be a different person.
Ooh, nice twirly mustache on the zombie.
Yes.
Why haven't we had a zombie with a twirly mustache?
I mean, that's the ultimate villain. That might be too OP for a zombie film. Is old-timey
twirling
villain with
his
a twirly
mustache.
Yeah, that might be a little too much.
Heading over into our film review of the week, we have Den of Thieves 2 Pantera. So this is a follow-up to the original Den of Thieves that you had 50 Cent, you had Gerard Butler, you have O'Shea Jackson Jr. in it, which of course is Ice Cube's son, which even more in this film, he's looking more and more like his dad the older he gets. And this picks up not too long after the first film where Nick is still looking for O'Shea's character Donnie. He's kind of disappeared over into Europe and seems to be going after diamonds. And that's kind of the heist that he's going after now. But, Nick just doesn't want to give it up. And, of course, he doesn't have the jurisdiction to go over to Europe to kind of go after him. So he's working things to where he can make his way over to try to get his hands on Donnie and finally get this guy away, because if you saw the first Den of Thieves, kind of at the end of the movie kind of had a twist that you find out that Donnie was kind of the ringleader behind it all. He was first looked at to being the getaway driver and just a guy who was being brought along and dragged along, but he was actually the mastermind behind it. So we get to see a little bit more of that side of Donnie in this film.
Yeah, because you come to find out Donnie's very versatile, very smart, multilingual. He can speak multiple languages, and kind of uses that to advantage here in this film. It's a fun take where you get Gerard you get this, is he a good guy? Is he not a good guy in this film? Like, Nick kind of goes on this journey where he's going after Donnie in Europe to try to stop him after this heist that you get at the beginning of the film, that these guys are such good thieves that they rob him and you couldn't tell that they were robbed. They find a way to make it look like it hadn't even been robbed to begin with, and it's a pretty fun premise to kind of jump off of. And you get Nick going to Europe to try to catch Donnie and put an end to this, but you get this whole elaborate setup where he gives you this appearance like he's ready to kind of maybe turn bad and join Donnie on this heist, because he's not in the best way. Personally, anyway, at the start of this movie, like, you could tell he's kind of been rough. There's jokes about him living in his truck and all that stuff. He's like, I like my truck, it's just some fun stuff. But you go on this fun, heist action type of adventure in this, where, there's partying and there's action and there's violence and there's, just a lot of suspense and, a really good mix of a fun modern action movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they did a decent job with it. Everyone played the roles well. That it had a few issues to me that, Gerard Butler was a little too over the top at times as Nick, because we got some decent performance out of him, but then you would get this unhinged, just crazy over the top kind of guy that was almost comical in a way, like not meaning to be comical, because there's ways that it's meant to be comical in the movie, but that it almost goes to a level that's all right. He's gone maybe a little too far with how over the top he is. I thought O'Shea did a fantastic job. Like, as you said, he's speaking multiple languages. He's talking with an accent even when he's talking in English, and they're setting up this heist. Like, the heist was the most fun part of it in the end. It drug on a little, maybe too long with the setup to it. Like, like the Ocean's movies being a heist movie, a lot of the film was the setup to the heist, but it did it in a fun, whimsical way. This one, it stayed serious for the most part of it, but it did feel like it took a little too long with the setup to get to the heist, because in the end, the heist part was really well done. It looked good. It was a lot of fun, but it was kind of a minor part of the movie in the end.
Yeah, I would say my biggest complaint, if I had one about the movie, is the length of the movie. This is a 2.5-hour movie. It's not a short film by any means. I think if they cut a good 30 minutes off of this and kind of cut some of this extra exposition out of there that it doesn't think was incredibly necessary for this movie, if they'd have kept this at a solid 2 hours, I would probably say I had even more fun with it. Like, it's not a bad movie by any means, but like, I think to your point, it does kind of drag things out a little too long. The heist part of the film is very well shot, really well done, really smart in how they put things together, and that does have a lot of fun with it, but there's a lot of other interpersonal, personal like exposition that it doesn't really serve the overall plot of the film that much, in my opinion. And it kind of does make it kind of drag out an extra 20, 30 minutes longer than it needed to be. Like I said, if this were a solid 2-hour action film, I would have had a ton more fun with it, but it did kind of feel like it drug on because I'm like, I remember looking at my time on my phone, and I'm like, man, we've been in this movie for an hour and a half. We still got another hour of this to go. And it's just, that's not a good thing for a movie when you're looking at it like, how far have we been in this? Like, it's one of those that definitely drug on too long for me.
Yeah, because, I mean, it had some interesting things because a lot of the movie in that part is, Nick goes to Europe. He's able to track down Donnie, which did seem a little too quick and too easy and convenient. And it was also a little too quick and easy that he convinced him to allow him to come. He's like, oh, yeah, I'm broke. I need this. I need the money. I'm tired of being this. He's like, okay.
All right, come on.
Come on. Let me take you to our hideout and introduce you to the entire crew and everything. And that just took a little too long. But there was a lot of, like, it went back and forth, the dynamics of building, Nick and Donnie's relationship up. Well, that was good. They had some good back and forth and stuff. But it did just take a little bit too long because we also got some subplots in there that didn't really serve much because there were some other guys on the crew that didn't like Nick coming in, so they disappear and they don't show up again until like the end out of convenience and stuff. And then you have another kind of subplot that involves something that Donnie stole before where this group shows up, but they only seem to be there to serve as a potential third film. Like, that's all they had. Like, they just show up, they disappear for a while, then they show up in the end, and it's like, well, again, that's another convenient thing to happen, and the only purpose they seem to fit in the film was to set up number 3.
Yeah, and it's very obvious that there's going to be a third Den of Thieves film at some point with the way the movie ends. We're not going to spoil the ending for you, but it definitely leaves things in a very obvious, there's going to be a third one with the way things move, and it's fun because one of the more interesting things is that struggle that Nick has where it's like, okay, I'm trying to bust these guys. I'm trying to like infiltrate and bust and kind of mold my way in there just to eventually bring it down. But at the same time, there is that, oh, I'm enjoying doing these bad things. Like, I'm having fun with it. Am I really the good guy that I think I am here? Because one of the things they do well is kind of tell that story with Nick and some of his like his own personal struggles with, does it feel right doing the right thing, or does it feel good doing the wrong things here? And like, is it better for me to be a good cop versus being this villain that I could potentially try to be? And he gets a taste of that, and he's like, oh, I kind of like that. And it's kind of, they play with a kind of willy won't he for a minute, and it pays off, and then it doesn't pay off by the end. It was kind of they kind of fumbled the end a little bit where it was just like, okay, I think I see what decision he wound up ultimately making, but it was one I think they could have cleaned up a little bit neater on that, but they did a fun job kind of playing with it throughout the film.
Yeah, the ending was kind of, it could have been better because, again, it felt kind of like they got to a point, all this could be the ending and stuff. You know what? We want to do a third one. Let's tack something else on there. And so that's kind of how it felt to me. Like, it ended in a good spot, and then it just felt tacked on with some other things. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing a third one. I had fun with it overall. Yeah. Like, talking about the negatives of it, there was still plenty of positive that kind of outweighed most of it. Like, it has its issues. It's not a perfect film by any means, but I had a good amount of good time with it. But yeah, being like 2:15 somewhere in there in the running time, it did feel longer. It felt 2.5, 3-hour movie, that it just had that kind of part in the middle that dragged a little too long. But there's also some fun scenes where like Nick goes to his ex-wife and who happens to be on a date and kind of has that classic, all right, well, the woman I love is with someone else, let me do my cop thing and show him who's in charge here and who you're dealing with her ex and stuff. That was fun, but overall I enjoyed it. I think it was a fun heist movie. I just wished we had more of the heist to it. It just did a little too much trying to set up the connections to the characters and to the group that just didn't really get you to care about them all that much.
Yeah, it wasn't effective. If you want to go that route and tell a story, that's fine. I just don't think they did an effective enough job of really giving us the opportunity to really care about some of the sub characters. Like it feels like we've really only cared about Nick and Donnie in this movie, and I think if they had focused a little bit more on their dynamic and trying to get Donnie to trust Nick. like that he was legitimately wanting to help him in this case. Like I think that would have made for a better story and a better film, but it's very obvious they're writing it feels like a case of writing a second movie to set up a third kind of thing, and their ways to try to make that make the most sense, and what they added to that film to try to set that up kind of takes away from the overall effectiveness of the film. Like had they focused even more on getting that trust built between Nick and Donnie to get him onto the team, because they do a fine job of getting them to bond after he's already accepted him and put him on the team. Like they do a fine job of it there. But I think if they'd have moved that to a little bit later and had him have to jump through more hoops to prove that he's down and willing to help, I think would have been better for the story, in my opinion. But at the end, we get what we get, and it's still a fun movie. The action's good and it's fun. It's just the structure of the story, I think, is what I personally had the most of an issue with, and that's just nitpicking on my part. Not to take away from the fact that it's a fun watch. It's a very fun watch. I could see myself throwing this on a weekend while I'm trying to like do other things and have it playing while I'm like cleaning the house or something. I could see that coming on and being a potential one that you have like a Saturday or Sunday afternoon when you're trying to clean up, get ready for the next week. Like that's one that I could see being put on for sure.
And it looked good as well. I mean, it was shot well. It had some good visuals to it and stuff. The action when it got to those parts was well done as well. Like you had some car chases, you had the heists and stuff, but a lot of that stuff and most of it happens later on. So I'm the same with you. It's the structure and how they handled setting up this story could have been done a little bit better, because it did drag a little bit. You didn't care as much. You should have had some more time of getting Nick to prove, like running little heist or doing something with him to prove that, all right, you're no longer a lawman, you're going in there. And we didn't even touch on the movie is called Den of Thieves 2 Pantera, because the group that ends up helping over in Europe is Pantera, but they're kind of barely in the movie as well. Right. They're kind of just there's a lot of stuff in this movie that will introduce you to these people that kind of fit, and we don't do anything with them until like the very end, and we just bring them all back and like, here you go, like there you go.
It felt like it felt a little misleading with the title and how they were involved in the overall story, but you know, like I said, it's very obviously setting up a third film. We get just so much fun and things, you know, that made the film wind up being enjoyable. So at the end of the day, Den of Thieves 2 Pantera it's a fun action film that has a little bit of structure, you know, story structure that could use a little bit more work, but it doesn't really take away from the overall enjoyment of the film, in my opinion. It has good action, the acting's good, and the storyline is not hard to follow along with. At the end of the day, I would give Den of Thieves 2 Pantera a 6.5 out of 10. It's not a terrible film, it's not a great film, but it was fun, and I wound up enjoying it more than I thought it would. I was really kind of going in with some really low expectations, but I wound up enjoying it a little bit more than I thought it would overall.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I never saw Den of Thieves 1 before the movie came out. I watched it a day before we went and reviewed the second one here, but I agree with all your points. Like it was a fine film. It was one that you can kind of turn your brain off and go into if you like the action heist films. Like there's a little bit to follow, but it's not a hard story to follow because it does have those structure issues with setting up its story. I would give it a 6.5 as well. Like it's not the best movie. It's not the worst movie. It has some good action. It looks, you know, well filmed. There's a little bit of overacting on Gerard Butler's part at times, but most of it falls down to just the story. Like it's got a decent story, but the structure of it just fails it in the end. But I think it's well worth watching. And there is an Easter egg for Ice Cube in there. So if you pay attention, and it's a pretty obvious one if you know Shay's dad and you know Ice Cube and stuff. It's a pretty obvious reference they do, but that was kind of a fun little Easter egg that they threw in there. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fun film. He looks so much like his dad in this one. That was kind of the biggest takeaway that we had coming out of this movie. Like, yeah, we like the movie, but my God, he's looking more and more like his dad in every film that he does, especially in this one, because he definitely bulked up. He bulked up for this movie too. Like he's getting bigger, getting stronger, and it looked like it paid off for him. But he does look so much like his father.
This will give some of his dad's looks.
He does. He has some of the facial expressions and the mannerisms and stuff like that. It's really cool. But he's really coming into his own as an actor too, and it's fun to see because he's been in a lot of fun things. But Den of Thieves 2 Pantera is in theaters now. We can't recommend enough going and checking it out. It's a fun action film that you can go and just kind of kind of lose yourself in the fun of the story for a couple hours in the theater. Well worth your time to check out.
Yeah, so if you go and watch Den of Thieves 2 Pantera, come to our comments, come to our Discord, talk to us about it. We'd love to talk about it a little bit more and see if you kind of had the same thing that we did about that. It could be a fun movie, but the structure had its issues. Come to our comments, come to our Discord, let us know what you thought about it.
So now we want to move on into our TV review of the week. We have season 1 of Creature Commandos. This is the first James Gunn-led property in the new James Gunn DC universe. It's an adult animated series, which is basically about, think of the Suicide Squad with monsters and, different non-human people with abilities and, even some humans with some different physical deformities. And of course, Rick Flag, who, if you've followed Suicide Squad or Peacemaker or anything like that, you know who Rick Flag is and you're aware of who he is. Played wonderfully in this and voiced wonderfully by Frank Grillo. Love Frank Grillo, obviously. But you get this full season. It's 7 episodes. It's out on Max now. We're kind of going to talk about what we liked and what we didn't like about the first season of this show. And in my opinion, it feels like this isn't the end, especially with the way they left it off. Like, you're going to see more of this moving forward. But how did you feel about James Gunn's first, venture into DC with this adult animated property?
I had fun with it, but it did have some issues with it because it did feel like, okay, this is just a Suicide Squad with different members. Like,
sure.
It's got different names, and I know these are pulling from the comics and stuff as well, but it didn't do a whole lot outside of what we've already seen with the Suicide Squad to bring something new. Like, I had fun with it. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it at all. It was a very enjoyable ride, and it felt very short, though. The 7 episodes, it felt like it ended right when it was really starting to get good.
Agreed.
It has already been greenlit for a second season, so we are getting more of it. But this is also one that's interesting because James Gunn did say that if someone voices a character in an animated property going forward in the DCU, they're going to play him in live action. So, like, Frank Grillo is showing up as Rick Flag Sr. in Superman, but there's already people pointing out the differences. He was doing another film at the time, or TV series, and he couldn't dye his hair because in the animated series here, he has grayish white hair. In Superman, it's already shown that he's got his regular brown, black hair. Mm-hmm. So there's already people pointing out there's already continuity issue because his hair color's the difference. Well, the actor couldn't dye his hair for the movie, so like maybe we get that. But I had fun with it overall. It was very dark and very graphic. Like it had some very graphic violence. I think David Harbour showing up as Frankenstein in it was a lot of fun, even though that's just they made Frankenstein's monster like even more messed up. Like it's got a lot of adult situations, especially revolving the bride and Frankenstein and Dr. Frankenstein and everything in there. Like that whole thing was like, okay, they're going there, and it doesn't hold back from doing anything. You've got a GI robot who just wants to kill Nazis, and all he cares about is there a Nazi? Is there a Nazi? Nazi? Are you a Nazi?
Like, yeah, J-Robot was my favorite.
He was fun. Like, that was voiced by Sean Gunn, who also comes back as Weasel. So this does kind of pick up right after James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie because we get Amanda Waller, who's still voiced by Viola Davis, kind of talking to Rick Flag about, well, they won't let us use humans anymore, but these aren't humans. And we do find out Rick Flag Sr. is kind of torn up a little bit because his son has died, which if you've watched James Gunn's live-action Suicide Squad movie, you know what happens there. But there was an interesting dynamic through it all. There were some characters that I get why they were in there, like Nina, but she didn't like fit in. Like I get what her role was among them, but she was like a big... I don't know, she didn't fit with anybody else. You get a pretty tragic story. Like, you get a lot of the backstory on these characters, and most of them are pretty tragic. Like, especially Dr. Phosphorus, who's Alan Tudyk, who is always fantastic. He also gets to voice an old character that he's still voicing on another cartoon that's not in the DCU. It won't fully give away because he's voiced a million different things. But the voice cast was fun overall. I just think it was hard for me to not see it as like, okay, this is just another Suicide Squad property.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of give people who haven't watched it yet kind of an easiest way to sum this up is you get 7 episodes and there's a linear story that plays out through all 7 episodes, but each individual episode is like a focus on one of the members of the team. So you get kind of this which is nice. It's a nice way of telling a season of a whole story throughout a season. Is you get this baseline situation where our team here is going to this foreign country. It's going to Pakistan, I think is what it's called. I forget the name of it, but to kind of protect the leader of this nation from Cersei, who is out to kill the leader of this nation, and they're going out there to kind of protect her. You have that whole narrative that plays out through the entire season, but you get each individual episode is a look into the backstory of one of these members. And what I actually do appreciate about this is it gets you to care about the characters enough, but they're not afraid to kill off a couple of characters in the show too. Like a couple of our team members don't make it through the season unscathed. Like they're not afraid to kind of keep you guessing in that sense, but it is a very dark, it is a very graphic, violent, sexual show. Like there's a good mix of a little bit of everything, but I think all the stories are coherent and told well enough in a way that it's easy to follow. You're not going to get lost in what's going on. But they do a good enough job of getting you to care about all of these characters and some of all the tragic backstories that all of these people do have. Because at the end of the day, these all are considered criminals, and you get how they get to where they're at. And some of it is through very tragic circumstances. Some of it's through just sheer, like, awful things that they've done to get themselves into this situation where they're in this, in this prison and have to be part of this team. But yeah, it does start to throw some very obvious parallels to the Suicide Squad, where you have, the button that can control all of them to kind of, force them to comply kind of thing. But it was a fun show. I had a good time with it. I agree with you. Like, I don't feel like it really hit its stride until about 2/3 of the way through the season. And I think they really found their voice by then, but it was a fun ride to go on throughout the entirety of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I said it felt like it just right when it was getting good and getting into the meat of stuff, it was over with. And I was like, wait, I don't have 3-4 more episodes to watch here, so sure. I am looking forward to season 2, but it did feel like it maybe needed a couple more episodes just to kind of flush it out a little bit more. Like, it ended in an interesting place that leaves us with more going ahead, and we also got some interesting things that they decided to do, that Cersei gives Amanda Waller kind of a look into the future that shows her why she's going after killing the princess, and we get to see a look at the kind of a future that we've seen in like Avengers Endgame, where Tony Stark got to see a potential end where all of the superheroes and stuff are dead. Well, we kind of got our DC equivalent here, that we get to see Wonder Woman and Superman, who is in the style of the live action Superman that's coming out, because they are connected. We also got a little look at Batman, which James Gunn tried to say we kept him in the distance because we don't have anything set on how he's supposed to look. But it was an interesting, because James Gunn has been so adamant, like, we're not green lighting, we're not doing anything unless we have a finished script that we're good with, and then we'll announce and we'll go forward. Well, they gave us a little glimpse at a Wonder Woman and at a Batman and everything else. So it's like, that's kind of contradicting a little bit, because you're going to have to stick with the designs that you did in animation for the live action, or exactly what are you going to do with that there? Like, it was interesting to see that, but it also brings up maybe a few issues that some people will have, like, well, that Batman doesn't look anything like your animated Batman. That Wonder Woman looks nothing like your animated Wonder Woman. So hopefully it's not something that backed him into, because, I mean, it's only like a minute-long scene or so, a 30-second scene. So it's in there, but it's a significant scene because it's showing you basically the whole DCU.
And you know how the internet works. They're going to hyper-focus on those screenshots, and they're going to take them, and they're going to come with receipts if it doesn't match their expectations based on what they've given us so far. But one of the things I'll give James Gunn credit for is he finds ways to take these obscure characters that, if you're not a hardcore comic book reader, like, you don't understand who these people are. And he does a good job of filling information in and getting you, like, background on who these people are and why they do it. He did obvious gangbusters with it with the Guardians of the Galaxy, who are among the popular Marvel properties now, but they weren't at the time when those movies were getting made. People are like, why are they taking this very small niche group of characters and building an entire franchise around it? He knows how to do it. So he does an effective enough job here giving you the background of these characters and things that happen to them and why they are the way they are, and you kind of go through this whole season-long story here at Pakistan. I know it's probably wrong and I'm going to get corrected for it, but it's a fun show. I had fun with it. Like, it did. It's not very much not meant for kids. And I love that they're not afraid to go there too, because it doesn't always have to be catered to, young audiences here, and they make it very clear from the beginning. This ain't what this is. This ain't what this is geared towards.
Yeah, there's some sex, some nudity, and graphic violence.
There's a little bit of everything in this. It's definitely not one to watch with the family, that's for sure. But if you're into these types of things, it's pretty well done. I will give it some of its flowers, like you said. It's not without some of its issues, but my issue with it as well is the lack of enough episodes for me, because there's 7 short episodes. The longest episode, I think, is like 26 minutes, like of all 7 of these episodes. So it's a very quick, easily bingeable watch. If you're on the fence on whether or not you start it, if you can carve out 3.5 hours, you can get through the entire season. It's not a difficult watch by any means at all. So it's one almost the length of, if you got time to sit down and watch Avengers Endgame, you've got time to watch this season, and it's an easy watch, and I'll appreciate it for that. But at the same time, he did leave me wanting more, which I know sometimes we're like,
good and bad.
Sometimes we want that and sometimes we don't. But in this one, he does leave us wanting more. Whether it's a good or bad thing, I'm still kind of making up my mind about it. But yeah, I am excited for season 2 to see where it goes. You get, obviously, lightly spoiled it, there are team members that don't make it to the end of the season. You kind of get some new ones introduced that could be part of the team moving forward in the next season, in the direction they go. There's going to be some familiar characters that get introduced in that reveal that you're used to seeing, and along with a couple of them, you're like, okay, what's their story going to be? And that's going to be part of the adventure that you go on. So good for him for kind of leaving a little bit of mystery in there to kind of get you on the hook, hopefully to come back with a meteor season 2 and see where they go.
Yeah, in the end, Creature Commandos Season 1 was a fun adventure back into the new DCU that James Gunn is doing. It was well animated. It was well voice acted. There's going to be some people who are going to have trouble with it, just not seeing it as a Suicide Squad clone.
Sure.
Because, I mean, it is very much a continuation of the Suicide Squad, but with monsters. But it is very graphic. It is very dark. But it was a fun ride overall. I would probably give it a 7 to a 7.5 in the end. Like, I enjoyed it. I just wanted some more episodes to flush out the story a little bit more, because it left me wanting more, which is good and bad, because we don't know how long it's going to take to get to Season 2. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this storyline that it introduced is going to play out throughout the rest of the DCU and live action.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My initial thoughts were a 7 out of 10 as well, because I don't feel like they gave us enough, if I were to say. Like, it is a short season. Like I said, it's only about 3.5 hours long, the entire season in totality. Now that it's out, go out and binge watch the entire thing. It's worth a watch, especially if you're going to find yourself invested in DC. I think if this is the way James Gunn kicks off his DCU, I think we're in for a potential treat moving forward, because it is fun, narrative wise. The animation style is really cool. They're not afraid to touch on some very dark, serious subject matter, and not really pull any punches there, which I kind of appreciate. You get this raw, grisly, stories that you get out of this, and they're not afraid to amp up the violence, that's for sure. And it's something that could potentially bode well for the DCU moving forward. Like, you're going to get kind of a little bit of everything, it seems like, and that's that's kind of what we want. You're going to get some of your more family-friendly stuff, and you're also going to get this very dark, adult-oriented content as well that, James Gunn did a good job of bringing it on. So I'm excited to see where they go next. And I agree with the sentiment of some people are going to have issues just saying it's a cheap Suicide Squad knockoff, which kind of isn't, because they're kind of their own characters. But the premise for them teaming up is pretty much identical to the Suicide Squad. So I get where the parallels are, but that's kind of where they end, because you get these creatures with some really cool, interesting, fun backstories that they decide to tell in this season. And it's definitely a fun watch, in my opinion.
And it's kind of interesting to see how they're going to stage all this stuff, because we're kicking off the DCU with this, and the next one is the live-action Superman. So you've got something dark, grisly, very violent, very adult, and Superman from the trailer is looking like it's more bright and colorful. Like, there's some darkness to it too, but the tones look completely separate and different. So it's going to be interesting to see how they pair and bring those worlds together, because I already mentioned, Rick Flag Sr. from the show is going to be making his live action debut in the movie. So those worlds are connected in a way here. We don't know if we're going to see any of the Creature Commandos show up. Maybe we'll get the Bride or something, like get a look at that, but we know at least one member, maybe Amanda Waller, will show up again as well. So they are going to be connected right away to Superman, and it's going to be interesting to see how they can weave the darker, more violent stuff in with the kind of, I guess I would say, more lighter. And Superman's never been like a gory, crazy, over the top character, but Creature Commandos was. So it's going to be interesting to see how he merges those together.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see how they play out. It'll be fun to see how he builds this entire universe and build these worlds with interconnected stories. And this is a fun way to kick it off, in my opinion.
Yeah, so Creature Commandos can be watched, all 7 episodes on Max right now. They're all out there for you to view, and we recommend seeing it. It is definitely not meant for kids, so if you don't want your kids seeing some graphic violence, that's not for them.
Yeah, of course, and if you watch it, come talk to us about it. Like I said, leave a comment in our videos, come to our Discord and have that conversation with us as well. Let us know what your favorite parts were of the show, what parts you didn't like as much, and let's have a conversation about it.
So coming up this week in theaters, we have Wolfman. So this is Blumhouse's version of the classic Universal monster. If you've been to any R-rated movie in the last probably 6 months, you've seen the trailer for this. And it's finally dropping this week. We also have September 5th and I'm Still Here. So 2 vastly different films from Wolfman, but that's what we have on deck for theaters this week.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Wolfman has been one that you and I have talked about, looking forward to for a while. Love the dark, the dark tones in the trailer. It looks a lot of fun. I'm excited to go check that one out for sure.
And if you don't want to be spoiled, there have been clips released of the transformation, the look of the Wolfman, because they've kind of hidden that in the trailers. If you don't want to know about it beforehand, when I saw that pop up, I'm like, nope, I'm going to wait till the movie. Make sure you avoid any clips before you go see the movie, so you don't have that transformation spoiled for you, because that's one of the parts of the movie you're waiting for. You're waiting to see exactly what the creature looks like.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of fun, and I'm excited to check that one out.
On the streaming side, we have Unstoppable on Prime Video on January 16th. And then on Netflix, we have Back in Action on January 17th. So that's a return of Cameron Diaz. This is our first project in, I want to say, like 10 years or something. It's the first thing she's done with Jamie Foxx. That's all dropping on streaming this week.
It's fun. It's good to see Cameron Diaz back on screen again. And she took a break for a while from Hollywood, but she's back. And it's going to be fun to see if that's definitely one I plan on checking out for sure.
Yeah, on the TV side, we have Castlevania Nocturne Season 2 on Netflix. We also have Harley Quinn Season 5 on Max. Both of those drop on January 16th. And another huge hit for Apple TV was Severance. Season 2 drops on January 17th, and I think on Rotten Tomatoes it's already still standing at 100% rating on it. Like, that's one I haven't been able to check out yet, but I really plan on checking out and seeing, probably binge watch season 1 and head right into season 2.
Yeah, it was a huge hit. Season 1 was a huge hit for Apple. It's another one that they're very excited about to put out there. Very well received and critically acclaimed. Harley Quinn is one that I've watched since the beginning. That's fun. If you want to hear Kaylee Cuoco curse a lot as Harley Quinn, it's very adult oriented as well. If you haven't seen any of those, lots of swearing and graphic violence. Just a fun, silly, over the top, really out of pocket show sometimes with some of the things they talk about and get away with saying, but it's animation, so the rules are a little looser for that. But definitely looking forward to seeing the next season of that, because I don't know how much longer that show is going to be around. We're up to season 5. Shows like that typically tend to have like a 5 to 6 season shelf life, so we'll see if we're coming near the end of that, but a wildly popular show on Max as well.
It's honestly gone on longer than I thought it would. Not saying that it's a bad show. It's a good show, but I didn't expect it to be a really long-running series from, because of how adult and crazy over the top is. Like, if you enjoyed Creature Commandos and you haven't seen Harley Quinn, you're going to enjoy that as well, because you also have a few voices that are found in both in there as well. But yeah, that's one, like I said, I was surprised that we're up to season 5 with it.
Yeah, crazy. It's been a sleeper hit for Max. It was on the original DC streaming service before it became Max and merged with Max. Like, it's been around for a minute, and I'm surprised. And I'm happy to see that it continues on, because it's a lot of fun and I get enjoyment watching it.
Yeah, it's a very enjoyable show. I think I'm about a season behind now. Like, I need to catch up on it just because I've had way too much stuff to watch. And me and my wife was watching it together, so we need to find time to get back in there and watch the next season.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to checking that out. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. Coming up next week, we will be reviewing the movie Wolfman. Very excited to check that one out. And we're also going to be reviewing season 1 of Disney Plus's Star Wars Skeleton Crew. Got the final episode of that coming out this week. Excited to catch that season finale and talk about it on the show next week. It's going to be a fun one to talk about. Until then, I'm Josh. He's Brad. We'll see you next week.